Hello, my name is Marcia VanderVinne. I will be graduating this spring 2025 with a bachelor's in music. For my senior capstone research paper, I set out to explore harmonic innovators and cultural catalysts in American jazz, specifically looking at the social impact and musical innovations of Louis Armstrong in the Real Ambassadors, Duke Ellington's Sacred Concerts, and John Coltrane's A Love Supreme. This research paper aims to explore the innovative musical works and of three pivotal architects of the jazz sound: Louis Armstrong, Duke Ellington, and John Coltrane. By examining specific works by these artists, the study will analyze how each artist not only advanced the musical landscape of jazz, but also used jazz as a platform for larger expressions for social advocacy, spirituality, and the exploration of human and divine connections, influencing broader American culture, social dynamics, and recognition of jazz music on equal footing with Western art music as a unique, original, and respected virtuosic American music artistry. On December 4, 1987, Congress passed a concurrent resolution respecting the designation of jazz as a rare and valuable national American treasure. This unequivocally recognized jazz as a uniquely American musical synthesis and culture, born out of the African American experience, to this country and to the world. My paper will contribute to a deeper understanding of how individual artists can drive both musical innovation and social change, particularly in relation to race, politics, and cultural identity. By focusing on the real ambassadors, concerts of sacred music, and a love supreme, the study will highlight the unique ways and specific genres of jazz in which jazz artists have responded to and shaped the cultural and social milieus of their times, and offer insights into the enduring legacy of these works in contemporary American culture and music. The H-Con Res 57 Congress's resolution marks a significant moment of institutional recognition for jazz, aligning it with other esteemed art forms and reinforcing its importance in the American cultural and historical landscape. With regard to some of the cultural backdrop in American culture and segregation at the time of these particular jazz works, I provided this timeline to show that in a timeline of how in the 1950s through the 1960s, America was still deeply segregated, and Black jazz musicians faced significant racial discrimination despite their cultural and artistic contributions. Jim Crow laws were still in place in the South, enforcing racial segregation in public spaces, including clubs, hotels, restaurants, and transportation. And even in the North, where legal segregation was less explicit, systemic racism created economic and social barriers. As the civil rights movement gained momentum in the 1960s, many jazz musicians became politically active. They used their music as a form of resistance and expression. Um, The Real Ambassadors, a groundbreaking 1962 civil rights jazz musical. The Real Ambassadors was a groundbreaking jazz musical written by Dave and Iola Brubeck and featured Louis Armstrong as their main character. It was a direct critique of American hypocrisy regarding race and democracy. The Brubecks were inspired by the U.S. Department's Jazz Ambassadors Program, which took place primarily between the mid-1950s and the early 1970s. It was a program sending prominent jazz musicians abroad to promote American values and counter Soviet propaganda. Artists like Louis Armstrong, Duke Ellington, Dizzy Gillespie, and Benny Goodman toured countries across Africa, Asia, and Eastern Europe using jazz, a uniquely American and deeply African American art form, as a symbol of freedom, creativity, and democracy. These tours highlighted both the vibrancy of American culture and, and the contradictions of racial segregation at home, as many of these musicians used their platforms to speak out against injustice, making jazz not just a cultural export, but a tool for social commentary. The Real Ambassadors is a jazz musical that takes place in a fictional African country newly arrived at independence. Armstrong is made king for a day and sets out to propose structure and reform to help take the newly found nation off to a good start. The cast of musicians also include the Brubeck Quartet, the Louis Armstrong All-Stars, Carmen McRae, and the Vocalese combo Lambert, Hendricks, and Ross. According to Iola Brubeck, the central figure of our play had to be Louis Armstrong. Louis embodied in magnificent proportions all the elements of jazz we wanted others to understand. His horn is his crown and scepter. Anyone who has been caught in Louis's spell can really believe that if we were to blast three times round, the walls of hate would come tumbling down. Louis Armstrong was a groundbreaking jazz trumpeter, vocalist, and bandleader whose music and charisma helped shape the course of jazz and popular music. Born into poverty in New Orleans, he developed his skills in the city's rich musical environment, eventually rising to fame as a virtuoso trumpeter and a pioneering figure in swing and improvisation. His technique was superior to that of all competitors. Altogether, his immensely compelling swing, his brilliant technique, his sophisticated, daring sense of harmony, his ever-mobile, expressive attack, timbre, and inflections, his gift for creating vital melodies, his dramatic, often complex sense of solo designs, and his outsized musical energy and genius made his recordings major innovations in jazz. By the late 1950s and early 1960s, Armstrong had become a global icon, not only for his music, but also as an unofficial cultural ambassador for the United States. His immense popularity and warm persona often placed him at the center of discussions about race and politics, even as he navigated the complexities of being a Black entertainer in a segregated America. His role as a lead musician in The Real Ambassadors was a natural extension of his life's work. The production, which satirized Cold War diplomacy and the racial contradictions of American society, resonated deeply with Armstrong's own experiences, having been sent on State Department tours as a jazz ambassador. He understood firsthand the irony of representing a country that still denied full rights to Black citizens. Armstrong's participation in The Real Ambassadors was both a personal and artistic statement. It was an opportunity to lend his voice and stature to a project that challenged racial and cultural hypocrisies while celebrating jazz as a unifying force. On the album, Armstrong's performance of They Say I Look Like God um, reflected his personal feelings about the civil rights movement, segregation, and the state of discrimination against colored people in his homeland. The verses written by Iola Brubeck were meant as witty satire, but the lyrics expressed what Lewis felt in his heart. He sings, "They say I look like God. Could God be black? My God, if all are made in the image of thee, could thou perchance a zebra be? He's watching all the earth. He's watched us from our birth. And if he cared if you are black or white, he'd mixed one color, one just right. Black or white, one just right." In the next song, um, the quick-paced vocalese harmonies of Lambert, Hendricks, and Ross introduces the question, who's the real ambassador? Before falling into double-time vocal and providing a brilliant contrast to Armstrong's solo in a laid-back swing mode when he responds, "I'm the real ambassador. Certain facts we can't ignore. In my humble way, I'm the USA. Though I represent the government don't represent some politics I'm for. Oh, we learn to be concerned about the constitutionality in our nation. Segregation isn't a legality." In the third song on this album, I've looked at cultural exchange. Louis Armstrong, Dave Lambert, John Hendricks, and Annie Ross sing about the way jazz music has the power to offer peace and resolve, political unrest, and the power of music to bring us all together. The song is primarily in a swing feel, with jazz harmonies characteristic of Brubeck's writing. The harmonic progression likely features extended and altered chords, common in jazz compositions of the era. Given Brubeck's tendency to use modal interchange and unexpected modulations, there are probably shifts in tonality that emphasize the satirical and somewhat ironic lyrical content. Brubeck's cultural exchange blends sophisticated jazz harmony, syncopated rhythms, and a satirical lyrical approach to challenge the hypocrisy of the U.S. government's jazz diplomacy efforts. The piece serves as a brilliant example of how jazz can be both a musical and political statement, using form and harmony to underscore its themes. John Coltrane was a groundbreaking jazz saxophonist and composer whose music evolved from bebop and hard bop to pioneering spiritual and avant-garde jazz. Born in Hamlet, North Carolina, and raised in High Point, he was deeply influenced by gospel music, the blues, and the big bands of his youth. Moving to Philadelphia in the 1940s, he studied music formally and played with jazz greats like Dizzy Gillespie, Johnny Hodges, and most notably Miles Davis and Thelonious Monk. Coltrane's artistic and personal transformation was catalyzed by his struggles with drug and alcohol addiction. After being fired from Miles Davis's band in 1957, he underwent a profound spiritual awakening, quitting drugs and alcohol. This experience deeply influenced his approach to music and shifting it towards a quest for transcendence and universal love. By the early 1960s, Coltrane had fully embraced modal jazz and freer improvisation, forming his classic quartet with McCoy Tyner, Jimmy Garrison, and Elvin Jones. His music became increasingly spiritual, drawing from diverse religious and philosophical traditions. This evolution culminated in A Love Supreme, a four-part suite that serves as both a prayer and a declaration of gratitude to God. Inspired by his spiritual rebirth, Coltrane saw music as a means of divine expression. The album's structure reflects a journey of struggle, redemption, and enlightenment, with its powerful motifs and hypnotic repetition reinforcing the sense of devotion and transcendence. It became one of the most revered jazz albums of all time, encapsulating Coltrane's belief in music as a force of higher consciousness and universal love. John Coltrane's approach to racial injustice was deeply spiritual and musical rather than overly political. A Love Supreme was also a deeply personal reflection of his journey toward inner peace and enlightenment, and while resonating with the broader struggles of Black Americans. Coltrane did respond directly to racial violence through music. One of his most powerful compositions, Alabama, in 1963, was inspired by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s eulogy for the 4 Black girls killed in the 16th Street Baptist Church bombing in Birmingham. The piece's somber, sermon-like phrasing reflects both mourning and quiet determination, making it one of jazz's most haunting protest pieces. Part 4 of A Love Supreme is a somber mix of modern jazz with the gospel in free time, reminiscent of that earlier work and direct connection to the tragic civil rights event. John Coltrane's Love Supreme was recorded in 1964 in one carefully planned session and is based on the poem A Love Supreme, which he wrote to explain his entire motivation for this project, and serves as a hymnal. It is a through composed suite, unfolding in 4 movements: acknowledgement, resolution, pursuance, and psalm. Acknowledgement opens with a hypnotic 4-note motif that echoes the phrase, a love supreme, serving as both a mantra and foundation of Coltrane's impassioned improvisation. His tenor saxophone moves with meditative intensity, building on McCoy Tyner's modal piano voicings and Elvin Jones's rolling polyrhythms, creating a sonic invocation of divine presence. The scale or mode is primarily based in F minor pentatonic and modal improvisation around F Dorian. The iconic 4-note motif F A flat, F B flat anchors this piece. Coltrane expands this minimal cell into spiritually charged modal improvisation. The use of Dorian adds a sense of contemplation and openness, allowing for fluid exploration over a static harmonic bass. In part 2, resolution, the tempo quickens and the harmonic structure becomes more assertive. Coltrane's lines burst with conviction, leaping through scales in search of truth, while the quartet locks into a driving, almost militant groove. The mode is centered around E minor, with modal leanings toward E Dorian and E Aeolian, but infused with Coltrane's scalar patterns from his sheets of sound technique. Part 3, Pursuance, follows with a blistering drum solo that launches into a high-energy swing section, full of cascading sheets of sound and relentless forward motion. This is the most virtuosic and searching movement, reflecting the soul's strife and struggle. The mode is built in B minor with modal interchange and extended harmonic vocabulary, including Mixolydian and bebop inflected scales during Coltrane's solos. This is the most energetic movement propelled by Elvin Jones's explosive drumming. Coltrane's solos here stretch the harmonic boundaries using rapid arpeggios, pentatonic bursts, and chromaticism. The modal foundation allows him to pursue transcendence with relentless passion. In part 4, psalm offers a profound release. Coltrane plays as if reciting a prayer through his horn, delivering a wordless sermon built on lyrical phrasing and tonal inflection, underscored by a meditative drone in the rhythm section. The scale is loosely based around F major with modal shifts and a free rubato feel. Though major in tonality, the harmonic movement is subtle and slow-moving, reflecting serenity and surrender. His phrasing mimics speech rhythms, literally the specific wording of his poem, A Love Supreme. It is a musical glimpse of Coltrane's personal expression of a heartfelt prayer. The modal fluidity allows for his deeply emotional nuance. This slide shows the modal structure of A Love Supreme. As a youth, Ellington was exposed to both sacred and secular music. He heard sacred music at the churches where his parents were members. The Baptist church choir sang traditional spirituals and gospel music. The atmosphere at services was emotionally spirited, and the music was mostly improvised. The music Ellington heard at the Methodist church, by contrast, was more traditional, more structured, and less emotional. The Methodists sang anthems by European composers and some traditional spirituals, probably using trained musicians in their performances. The secular music Ellington heard as a youth was ragtime. He was attracted to this music, and it became the basis for his early compositions. Ellington's sacred concerts, composed between 1965 and 1973, were a deeply personal expression of his spirituality and artistic evolution. He described them as the most important thing I have ever done. His inspiration stemmed from a combination of factors: his lifelong faith, a desire to merge jazz with sacred themes, and the social turbulence of the 1960s. As the civil rights movement challenged racial injustice, Ellington sought to create music that promoted unity and transcendence. His first sacred concert premiered at Grace Cathedral in San Francisco in 1965, combining jazz, gospel, classical elements, and choral arrangements. He followed with two more sacred works in 1968 and 1973, each expanding his vision of jazz as a vehicle for spiritual and cultural expression. The sacred concerts arrived at a time when the civil rights movement was reshaping American society. Through their themes of unity, redemption, and injustice, these works provided a musical space where spiritual reflection and social activism converged. Songs like Come Sunday embodied the hope and resilience of Black Americans seeking justice. His fusion of jazz with gospel, blues, and European classical traditions reflected the vast spectrum of Black musical heritage. This not only honored African American musical roots, but also pushed the boundaries of genre, encouraging future artists to blend styles in innovative ways. Being a being a lifelong advocate for Black excellence and dignity, he used the sacred concerts to pose deep philosophical and theological questions about humanity, purpose, and morality. In a time of social upheaval marked by the Vietnam War, protests, racial strife, and cultural shifts, his music provided a reflective space for audiences seeking meaning amid chaos. Duke Ellington's unmistakable sound were put together and created by his musicians: Sonny Greer on drums, Otto Hardwick on sax, James Bubber Miley on trumpet, Harry Carney on sax, Joe Tricky Sam Nanton on trombone, Ben Webster on sax, young Jimmy Blanton on bass, Ray Nance on trumpet and violin, Johnny Hodges on reeds, and Billy Strayhorn became Ellington's kindred spirit, both as second pianist and composer-arranger. At Sacred Concert Number 2, Alice Babs, Duke Ellington, and Johnny Hodges performed Heaven. Please take a listen, as it is one of the most haunting vocals I have heard and became my inspiration for this entire capstone research paper. Alice Babs sings Heaven, my dream, heaven divine, heaven supreme, heaven come by, every sweet and pretty thing life would love to bring. Heavenly heaven to be is just the ultimate degree to be. Harmonically, Heaven features Ellington's signature rich, extended chords, often using lush voicings that give the piece a warm, celestial quality. The chord progressions mix gospel, blues, and impressionistic harmonies, creating a sense of devotion and transcendence. The piece is generally centered around C major, though it features modal and chromatic inflections. Ellington often uses extended harmonies and chromatic movement, creating a sense of floating or reaching toward the divine. The overall tone is haunting and ethereal. This page shows a comparison of all three of the sacred concerts. The final third sacred concert in 1973 was completed near the end of Duke Ellington's life. It premiered at Westminster Abbey, London, and also performed in Barcelona and other places. It was a spiritual farewell filled with grace, humor, and gratitude. The jazz music works Today, the jazz music works of Louis Armstrong, John Coltrane, and Duke Ellington continue to shape contemporary music, culture, and social consciousness in profound ways through authenticity and individual expression, innovation and evolution of jazz, cultural connection and social commentary, bridging generations and spirituality. The Brubecks and Louis Armstrong's message about the absurdity of segregation has been an enduring one. Through several revival concerts and films, their music continues to bring people together while resounding echoes from past darker times in our history that should never be forgotten, continue to be learned from, and recognized for its contribution to the reshaping of American culture. A latest revival concert is a film released in 2021 to celebrate the 60th anniversary of the Real Ambassadors album. It is a film co-presented by the Louis Armstrong House, Museum, and the Forum for Cultural Engagement. A Love Supreme by John Coltrane became a touchstone for artists seeking to infuse their work with deeper meaning, whether in jazz, classical, rock, or hip-hop. Some of the artists influenced by A Love Supreme are Kamasi Washington, jazz, in spiritual jazz epics and orchestration, Branford Marsalis, also with jazz, life tributes, modal improvisation, Carlos Santana in rock Latin fusion for spiritual improvisation, modal scales, Kendrick Lamar in hip-hop, jazz-infused arrangements, social themes, The Roots in hip-hop, jazz rhythm and live performance style, Flying Lotus for electronic jazz fusion for modal harmony, spiritual and abstract themes, even Radiohead in alternative rock for improvisational structure, modal textures, Sonic Youth with experimental rock for avant-garde dissonance and spiritual abstraction, Philip Glass in minimalist classical genre for repetitive harmony and modal concepts, and his wife even in spiritual jazz, extending the Coltrane legacy, and orchestral jazz. Duke Ellington's compositions are, are performed in churches and cathedrals worldwide. They remain a testament to his ability to transcend musical boundaries and create deeply meaningful art. Ellington's fusion of jazz with gospel, blues, and European classical traditions reflects the vast spectrum of Black musical heritage. This has not only honored African American musical roots, but also pushed boundaries of genres and an encouragement for future artists to blend styles in innovative ways. In conclusion, jazz has been a cornerstone of American cultural and musical identity, evolving through the contributions of its most influential artists. Louis Armstrong, Duke Ellington, and John Coltrane are three prominent architects of the jazz sound. Their respective three music projects brought together jazz, civil rights themes, and the divine. The Real Ambassadors, Sacred Jazz Concerts, and A Love Supreme were works of jazz innovation as a platform for larger expressions, for social advocacy, spirituality, and the exploration of human and divine connections in American culture. Okay, and finally, a few words about my creative component, a 4-song EP, which obviously was directly inspired by John Coltrane, A Love Supreme. Jazz to me has the means to express and represent all the nuances of the human soul, especially when writing about complex emotions. The use of extended chords, tritone substitutions, um, dissonant voicings. To me, those represent all those spaces in between notes, which can be so helpful in expressing certain phrases and feelings and states of mind. And therefore, I connect deeply with jazz music, and I'm hoping that reflects in my EP. Enjoy. And thank you for a fantastic, amazing ride here at CSUMB.